And Batya's here.
Oh, Batya is here too.
Fine,
Good.
I'll allow it.
I'll make you a co-host, Daphne.
Ooh, such power.
Batya, I took a tour today. Exactly where you're going to be in. May I go ahead?
What is happening?
Okay.
May I go ahead?
Yeah.
Proceed, Sabah.
Okay. So anyway, so we even in El Yisrael we keep Rosh Hashanah 2 days, and it's an interesting thing. It's called Yoma Arichta. It's a long day of 48 hours basically. So much so that there's a question whether or not you should say Shechianu on the second day, because normally if you have 2 days in Chutz La'aretz, it's 2 separate days. Yom Arichta means it's really one long day. In order to get around it, we have a new fruit on the second night or wear something new. Everybody's aware of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Batya, you're muted, and Daphne's muted. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, is that clear that somehow or other Rosh Hashanah is different from all the other holidays? In Chutz La'aretz, Sukkot and Simchat Torah is 2 days, and Pesach is 2 days, and Chacham Shul Pesach is 2 days, and Shavuot. But in Eretz Yisrael, we keep only 1 day. What's the reason we keep 2 days in Chutz La'aretz? Because there's all the question when the moon will be seen. I'll go with some very basic things most of you are aware of, but let's just quickly get in it and we'll see some very interesting things. So normally a month can be either 29 days or 30 days. It can never be 31 days, it can be 28 days, because it turns out to be that the moon goes around at 29 plus. Everybody's aware of that, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So Rosh Chodesh can either be on the 30th day or on the 31st day, or 2 days, depending. Everybody's in on that?
Yeah.
Okay. The only holiday that comes out on the first day of the month is Rosh Hashanah. There's no other holiday like that. In fact, the reason we call it Ben Keser Asor, Keser means Halavana Kesuya. The Levana is covered. What does it mean? You don't see it. The moment you see a sliver of it, that's the Rosh Hashanah starts. So far, so good. So now in the days before they had a Luach, you would have to wait for 2 witnesses to say, we saw the moon. And when we saw the moon, then you already have the next month. And that becomes Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Chodesh. In this case, Rosh Chodesh, Tishrei. Yeah? Everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
little complicated. If you're not too good in math like me, it's complex. So if not, just raise your hand and do something. Is everything clear? So now let's make believe we're back in the days of the Sanhedrin, and it's Monday night, and so far no witnesses have come. So we go to shul, and we wish each other K'tiva v'chatima tova, and we eat, if you do want heads of fish, and we take honey, and morning you come in and you blow the shofar, and maybe yes, maybe not, if witnesses have not come yet. So it's very complicated, no? It turns out that the Beit Din stops around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They're not going to keep taking witnesses 3 minutes before Shkia. So now you have an interesting situation. You have from between 2 o'clock in the afternoon till maybe 7 o'clock, some 5 hours. What is it? You already blow shofar, you already did everything, but you know for a fact that those 5 hours are really not Rosh Hashanah, because you know that you're not going to accept any more witnesses till tomorrow. Even if they don't show up, if witnesses don't show up, what will happen? Well, automatically, the month can only be 29 days or 30 days. I don't even need witnesses for next day. So now I've shot the Beit Din 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody showed up. It's now 2 o'clock. It's 3 o'clock. And Penny and Mayor Becker are davening mincha because they're davening for the Amid. And what mincha are you going to daven? You're going to daven mincha chol, or you're going to daven mincha Rosh Hashanah. Chazal therefore made an interesting thing. They made a holiday for 5 hours, and that is really Rosh Hashanah, not the holiday Rosh Hashanah of that Hashem told us to do, but there's an actual time in which Chazal made a holiday. It's the only holiday that we have. All the holidays that we keep in Chutz La'aretz for 2 days is because we don't know. It's a safek. But there's no safek here. There's no safek those 5 hours. Those 5 hours is not Rosh Hashanah, and yet you keep Rosh Hashanah. As a result of that, we now have a situation where even in Eretz Yisrael, you keep Rosh Hashanah how many days? 2 days. And it's not because of safek, it's because actually we have 2 days Rosh Hashanah. So that is basically, is everybody with me on that? Any questions about that? It's a complicated thing. Okay.
Saba, the extra part of the Chag is not really from the Torah, it's just from the rabbis.
Those 5 hours.
Okay.
Okay?
Mhm.
Those
Okay.
5 hours. However, as it turned out, every year, since the time of it always turned out that the first day of Rosh Hashanah was the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So now you have a very interesting situation. You have a situation where realistically it always turned out to be the first day, the real Rosh Hashanah. But because of that very peculiar situation, you're ending up with Rosh Hashanah being 2 days, even in Eretz Yisrael, because it's not a safek. It's a real thing. Now, I want to show you something fascinating about this, because you would think, where did the Chazal come up with such an idea to make 2 days Rosh Hashanah when in fact it's only 1 day? And in fact, there is Rosh Hashanah the first day. So I'd like to do a very interesting thing for you and go back to the story of Adam HaRishon. Everybody knows Adam HaRishon was told, Ki b'yom ocholcha mimenu mot tamut. If you eat from this particular tree, you will die. B'yom ocholcha. Everybody knows that comes Shabbos afternoon, the day gets darker and darker and darker, and he fears, b'yom ocholcha mimenu mot tamut. This is my death. You know that story, right? Yes. Then comes Motzei Shabbat, and Hashem puts a fire up. Oh, borei morei ha'esh. This is not the way I have to understand Ki b'yom ocholcha mimenu mot tamut. It's not the day. There are other things. Is everybody familiar with that? Anybody not familiar with it? The reason that we say borei morei ha'esh, amongst other things, on Motzei Shabbat, is because Hashem at that moment put up fire, and that showed to Adam HaRishon that the darkening of the day, as the day got darker and darker for Mincha time, is not his death. Anybody ever think about that story and think about the big question? Why wasn't Adam HaRishon worried about Friday afternoon? It
Like
gets
Friday
darker and
night?
darker. Yeah, Friday night. He sees 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Shabbat, and it gets progressively darker till 7 o'clock at night. This is his death. And then Hashem puts fire, and it's a borei morei ha'esh. What about Friday afternoon? Remember, the Eitz Hadat occurred Friday afternoon. Mm. Most people don't think about it, and it's very peculiar. And it troubled me many, many years, until I came across a very interesting Rabbeinu Bachai, and I'd like to share that with you. And for this, you really need a little bit of math. So if you're not too good at math, don't worry about it. Ellie will have to use you. Don't use me, because I'm not very good at this. And okay, take a look and see what happens. Bereshit bara Elokim vahi erev vahi boker yom rishon. What does that mean? Vahi erev was what?
Yom Echad, I think, right?
Oh, Yom Echad. What does that mean? Sunday night, vahi erev vahi boker. Monday morning
makes the first day.
Is the first day. Vayerav vayvoker yom sheni. No. Monday night.
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning. Go all the way through. Vayerav vayvoker yom hashishi. What is that?
Same. You have Friday
Thursday
night
and Friday morning.
Shabbos.
No, Friday morning, not Shabbos. No. Vayerav vayvoker, it works out to be Thursday night and then morning, Friday morning. Nowhere does it say Vayerav vayvoker yom hashvi'i.
Oh.
Is that clear to everybody?
So it means there wasn't a night?
Comes Rabbeinu Bachya and tells me a very interesting thing. Do you know why Adam HaRishon didn't have to worry about the nighttime? Because there was light time all night. The Shabbat never turned to be black. The first time it started to get dark is Shabbos afternoon. That makes excellent sense. And I'm going to show you an interesting thing. So now we have a situation where what happens? That Shabbat, that particular year, the first year, was how many hours?
That particular,
How many hours?
48.
48, because it didn't go down. The sun did not go down that night.
mhm.
That particular year, the first year of the universe, the sun did not go down, and therefore the day was how many days? How many hours?
48
Well,
hours.
48 hours. What day of the calendar was Adam HaRishon created?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. How many days was the first Rosh Hashanah? How many hours was the first Rosh Hashanah?
48 hours.
48 hours. Yom HaRichta is not completely something that Chazal made out of nowhere. The first B'riyat HaOlam turns out to be what? 48 hours. Oh, if there is a model for Rosh Hashanah to be 48 hours, under certain circumstances, we as Chazal can create a situation, and now we understand that Rosh Hashanah is Yom HaRichta, and how many hours? 48 hours. And now you understand why Adam HaRishon did not have to worry about Friday afternoon, because Friday afternoon never got dark. And it's not finished yet. There's a Gemara, there's a halacha. If a person doesn't have enough money, but he only has enough money for yain or ner on Shabbat, what should he do?
I'm gonna
He
guess.
only has so much money, enough for ner or yain the kiddush.
You do yayin?
No, you would think so. A kaddish kiddush. No. Ner. Now, one of these be called shalom bayit. You want to have a house in which it's not dark. You can't, which is true. But there's another reason. If we want to recreate Shabbat the way the first Shabbat was, our Shabbat is a Shabbat of Shabbat Bereshit, we don't want to have it dark in the house. And if we don't want to have it dark in the house, and I only have money for Kiddush and only money or that, get yourself in there. That way we recreate the original Shabbat, and this Rosh Hashanah, we recreate the first Rosh Hashanah in having 48 hours.
Very interesting.
Phenomenal. I mean, when it took me, I tell you, it's relatively recent. I was able to figure all this all together because I saw Rabbi Nebuchad. Rabbi Nebuchad doesn't talk about Rosh Hashanah. He only says it was 48 hours. But then I said, wait a second. What part of the calendar is it? Yom HaRichta. Anybody else want to add anything to this?
So I have a question. I know you got 48 hours from 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but how is that a week?
A what?
You said it was a week. The first week was 48 hours.
No, I'm sorry. The first Shabbat of the Shabbat of the first week in history.
Oh, okay.
No. The Shabbat of the first week in history lasted basically 48 hours because the sun never set. And as a result, that model of the first time, which is Rosh Hashanah, is 2 days, that year, Chazal can come back and say, okay, I have a model in which, in this instance, I make Rosh Hashanah 2 days.
Very nice.
It's very nice. I think it was a beautiful thing. Anybody else want to add anything to this?
I have a question, Saba.
Sure.
Is there a difference between the first and second day of Rosh Hashanah, or do we say it's all the same thing?
Okay, did everybody get Ellie's question? It's a major question. It's a major question, and it's a question that expresses itself halachically. Is it 1 day or is it 2 days? And as you know, of course, the biggest halachic issue has to do with Shechianu. If it's 1 day, you don't say Shechianu the second night, which is why because we can't answer your question, Ellie, because whenever you have a question, obviously it's both. It has elements of first day and has elements of. So in order to be Yotze both, we eat a new fruit or we wear a new shoe, new clothing, something different in order to have. And even not only that, even the Baal Tokeah has to put on a new suit or something on the second day to answer your question, which he obviously has no answer for. Because if he were 100% sure, either he would say Shechianu, he would not say Shechianu. But because of your question, where there's an element of 1 day and an element of 2 days, he puts on a new suit, even though he blows shofar, and it says Shechianu at that point. I want everybody to understand Eli's question. When Eli asked this question, you're not going to say, is a horse a giraffe? Never. Or is a horse a mouse? It doesn't happen. You may say, is a horse a zebra? In other words, the elements together. You'd never ask a question, is it 2 days or 1 day, unless there are elements of both in it. So the question itself indicates that there's a possibility of either one of those. And because there's a possibility, and we have not come to a conclusion, we have to do both. Generally, remember, a question is not, is a shaver a car. Never. But other things can happen. So in this case, we have it because of that very question that you're asking. Intrinsically in that is that there are elements of both, and because elements of both, the Baal Tokeh has to wear a new tie or something. I want to wish everybody K'tiva v'chatima tova. Wish you a wonderful, wonderful year, and Mikol Tov, everything good. And I wish everybody the best. Anybody else want to say anything?
Saba, can I ask?
Saba.
Thank you all. So,
Aya, you have a
again, let's
question?
keep doing this. This is it's an amazing thing, and we've done it now pretty good this year. I think we haven't missed too many. So,
Saba
shalom
Baya has a
uvracha.
question.
Sure.
Question. All the time between Matan Torah and Chazal, they only had 1 day of Rosh Hashanah?
Okay, that's a very good question. Did everybody get Batya's question? Batya is asking realistically what happened. That's a very good question. Realistically, it happened to be that there were always witnesses on the first day. So in fact, it turned out to be 1 day, and probably it was just 1 day. But you understand where the problems come. The problems come in when 2 witnesses, at least theoretically, don't show up. I'm not sure I can tell Matan Torah. I know the Gemara does say Mimei Ezra. Mimei Ezra, it never happened that there were not witnesses to show the first day. That's a good question. But your question implies what was the reality? And we're talking about what is the halachic aspect. So it's a very good question. It's a question, realistically, what happened? Well, of course, it was the first day. Everybody knew that. But halachically speaking, it would be, just think for yourselves. You go to shul, you sit there for 6 hours, you hear the belong of the shofar, you find out everything. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Hey guys, it's not real. This whole thing was nothing. Tomorrow come back, we'll do this. It just wouldn't work, right? It wouldn't work. So Chazal have to take that theoretical condition into thing. To answer your question, Matan Torah, the Gemara does not answer that, but the Gemara definitely answers your question from the time of Ezra.
Well, I think the question is really, what's the Chag supposed to be? Is it supposed to come out 2 days every
yes.
time?
Batya, look at the pasuk. The pasuk says it's the first day of the year. Yom HaZikaron. It's 1 day. There's no question about 1 day. But the only unusual part of it is Bakesel Yom Chagenu. It's a Chag that the moon is mechuseh. And the moment you have a Chag that's the moon is mechuseh, and our Jewish calendar works on the basis of Eidim showing a release of this moon, by definition, it's going to be a problem. It'll never happen Pesach, because Pesach is the 15th day. Sukkot or whatever, Shavuot, never happened. Purim, it never happened. Rosh Hashanah is unusual in that respect. So we have to work along 2 planes, a plane of reality and a plane of halachically, and even a plane of intellectual. What are you going to do next year? I say, oh my gosh, I'm going to sit in shul another 6 hours and find out later on that it was all for nothing. So the elements, multiple elements that work in halacha. Halacha doesn't just work, but it's a valid question. Okay, Yafeh.
Okay, thank you, Saba.
Thank you all. Shabbat shalom lachem. No. K'tiva v'chatima tova lachem. It's very complicated. Shalom lachem.